My name is Segev Tzfati. I'm Director of Academic Programs here at the Stanford Center for Professional Development. And I'm really excited to have you here tonight. We have gathered a very interesting group of people to share information with you. And we'll start by just taking this and getting started. So I want to acknowledge all the SCPD team members who are working with colleagues and other teams across the university with a single purpose in mind, and that is to give you access to these classes that are offered every quarter here at Stanford. The result, this autumn quarter, SCPD is offering 64 classes to remote students, and we're excited to have you here and join us. As you look around the room and as you get to know your classmates later in our welcome reception, also know that you're part of a group of more than 1,100 remote students that are joining you this quarter from around the world and all over the country. So on behalf of all of us at Stanford, congratulations on taking this step in your education journey. We're really glad you're here. Our goal tonight is to share with you the information you need to know to get the quarter off to a good start. Our discussion will be mostly Q&A with a panel of experts, 2 returning SCPD students, a professor, and a TA, all of whom will tell it to you simply just the way it is. But before we dive in, I want to introduce our keynote speaker tonight, computer science professor John Mitchell. John earned his bachelor's degree at Stanford and his master's and PhD degrees at MIT. He joined Stanford as a professor in 1988, and over the years has published hundreds of articles and collaborations and taught and advised thousands of students. John's first research project in online education started in 2009 when he and 6 undergraduate students built Stanford Courseware, an innovative platform that expanded to support interactive video and discussion. Courseware served as a foundation for initial flipped classroom experiments at Stanford and helped inspire the first massive open online courses, better known as MOOCs, from Stanford that captured worldwide attention in 2011. Since 2012, John has served as Vice Provost at Stanford, most recently as the Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning. Under John's leadership, SCPD transitioned from the School of Engineering to a unit within VPTL, allowing SCPD to have a broader impact and reach across the entire university. After completing 2 terms as Vice Provost, John stepped down earlier this year, but before we started missing him too bad, and for real, we were happy to learn that in January he will become chair of the Computer Science Department, by far our largest collaboration in the university. So while he's no longer my boss's boss's boss, I'm still working for him. So with this in mind, please help me and give John Mitchell an SCPD welcome. Thank you, John.
Yeah. Thank you, Segev. So I just want to welcome you all here and congratulate you on making the excellent choice to listen to people like me and believe what we say and go off and tell other people, because it's all true and we wouldn't teach you anything if we didn't know it well here. So I think this program here has been very successful. Many of you may not know much about the history. Apparently, in the School of Engineering, our distance education programs date back to 1954. So that's before I was born. I have no idea what they did in 1954. Probably something on paper in the mail or something like that. I don't know how they did distance education in 1954. I know in the 1970s, we had this kind of direct microwave TV link to local companies. Hewlett-Packard was one of the leading companies in the Valley at that time. Other companies would subscribe. And I was actually a student here, as Segev mentioned, sometime in that decade. And what I remember from a course that I took in this building, just right above this auditorium, is we would all sit in the classroom and look at our little screens, and the person at the front would talk at his little screen. And whenever there was a question, somebody else in the Valley could push their button at their site in Milpitas or Cupertino or someplace else in Palo Alto and ask a question in real time. So the quality of some things has gone up up, but we've kind of lost that interaction with you if you're remote, and I hope it'll come back sometime in the time that you're involved in this program. I'm not quite sure about that, but I really liked that interactive activity, and I think that's something we can hope for in the future. Since the 1990s, this has been web-based delivery, which has been very successful. We, as Segev mentioned, offer about 200 courses a year from the School of Engineering and otherwise in the format that you're taking them. And that's, if you were to count the number of students enrolled on campus and where they're enrolled in, that's the bulk of the student course hours in the School of Engineering are all available to all of you. So I think that's really represents our commitment at Stanford to reaching as many people as possible as successfully as we can. And you all look bright and cheerful and energetic, and so I'm sure we're reaching the right people as best we can there. One thing you might not know is that you probably have the same experience remotely as students on campus. It turns out that about 80% of the video views for the courses that we deliver in the form that you see them are from students on campus. So you might not see it remotely, but for most of us teaching, the room is empty and everybody is remote. So you are following the most popular path through Stanford by being remote students. You're in really good company. I don't know if you've been to the Huang Engineering Building. Does anybody recognize that? It's the place where there's a cafe and stuff just over behind this building. Jensen Huang, who was the donor, the building is named after, was a remote student. He got a master's student at Stanford, and as far as I know, he never set foot on campus during that time. So you're on the path to become CEO of a company like NVIDIA, if you want, and if you're lucky. A friend of mine, Bill Dally, who used to teach in our department, has been the chief scientist of NVIDIA for maybe 10 years. And he told me an entertaining story that I'm not going to repeat about Jensen Huang being pulled over by the California Highway Patrol for driving his Ferrari too fast down the highway. So I wish you success. If you have that kind of success, don't tell us. But if you have another kind of technical success around your business or your scientific career, we'd love to hear about it. The way you drive your Ferrari is kind of your business. So please enjoy the courses. I know that they're challenging. We try to challenge everyone. That's what we do for a living. But work hard, have fun, learn stuff. And, keep in touch. Let us know when something is successful, when something isn't. One of the things that I really appreciate very much, and it happens all too infrequently, is, somebody a year, 5 years, 10 years after they took a course will send me an email and say, that course I hated when I was a student, meaning my good course, It actually was very valuable, and the most important part to me was this, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, but now I do. That kind of thing is very gratifying as a teacher. We teach to, this big empty room and lots of people on video, so hearing from you is valuable to all of us. And I know as you go forward in your careers and have the success in the directions you choose, your advice and input to us on what we could do better or what topics we should cover or how we've been helpful to you is very valuable to us. So please, make good connections with each other, with other people in the courses and programs you enroll in, and keep us informed of what happens to you and where we've been helpful to you and how we could be more successful in reaching others. So that's basically my thought. I don't know if there are any questions, but I do appreciate all of your interest in our programs. We work hard, as Segev said, there's a big organization here to try to deliver to you the best possible experience we can for people at a distance. And from the point of view of being on the faculty here, we feel very enthusiastic about our fields. We love our work. We love our topic area. And we're really just very pleased to be able to share that with as many people as possible. So please have a good evening here. Enjoy meeting each other. And thank you for coming.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Let me share with you the plan for the evening. First, I'm going to briefly overview some of the key information you need to know as the quarter begins. Because all of this information is available online, I'm not going to go into a lot of details about it. It's on our website, the SCPD website, or the university website, right? I do recommend that if anything I speak to is something that is confusing, not familiar, or new, please be sure to ask questions of our team later tonight and as we go to our network receptions. We want to make sure that you have the right information. So after going over the short deck, we'll introduce our panel team members. We'll respond to your questions. Now, this is really cool, and this is our first time trying it, but it's been tested here. So let's give it a try. I'm going to ask you to go to paulf.com/scpd on your phone. And start, you have a choice to enter and input a question that you would like to ask the panel. You also have the very cool opportunity of upvoting questions that have already been submitted. And by you upvoting the question, it gives us an indication as to whether or not this is of interest to a larger number of individuals. And we'll try to go through the questions that are of most interest to the most people as best we can. The other cool thing about it is you can also vote down questions, but we don't do this here, right? It's technically possible, but it's not cool. So please remember that. And also our tech team is appreciating your stress testing our Wi-Fi in the room. I hope everybody will be able to connect. Doing it before the quarter is better than as the quarter begins. So let's get started. Accessing course content, right? So as we all know, our quarter begins next week. Next week is week 1. The most important thing for you to do is to access your course website and identify the platform and how to access the lectures in the course. Go to the SCPD website, then click on the My Stanford Connection button, log in, and as you complete your login process, you'll get to essentially your dashboard where the class or classes you're taking will be listed, right? That should provide information for you at the very least to our video platform. Our video platform and VideoX is where recorded lectures are hosted. Do not wait to receive a special invitation from anyone, right? So this is just like when you got your undergraduate degree or any other graduate degree, right? You're now a student in the university. You're expected to find your classroom, even if it's a virtual classroom. Many teaching teams will send out a welcome email. But it's your responsibility to go and find that information. I do want to mention that depending on the course that you're enrolled in, you will access your course information either via a Canvas website. Canvas is a learning management system in use here, or a website, or some other platform. That information is available to you after you log in. For most classes that we offer here at SCPD, recorded lectures are also available in near real time by logging into canvas.stanford.edu. You go to canvas.stanford.edu, you use your student ID to sign in, you get your dashboard with a tile that you can click and access your class. So the nice thing about it is that because classes are streamed in near real time, if you know, for example, that your first class is on Monday at 9:30 and your schedule is open at work, you can actually log into the system and you'll be able to watch that first lecture as it is given. Canvas is also the place where recording of lectures and other sessions from the course will be kept throughout the quarter. So definitely check that out. Real easy to use. We get fantastic reviews for that system. Contacts. Any questions you have about your course, about your class, the best way to get an answer is simply to contact the teaching team. And how to contact the teaching team will be available on the class website. Any other issues that are not related to the academic content, or if you're not sure, please do not hesitate and contact our student and client services team. We're here to support you, especially during the first week of the quarter. So the one thing we don't want to do is don't hesitate, right? Ask us those questions. Exam procedures, very, very important, and you'll notice the red font, right? So students in classes with in-class monitored exam must have an approved exam monitor. Information about how to get that process started is on the exam section in My Stanford Connection. So just log in and understand the process, understand how it works. The autumn exam monitor nomination due deadline is Monday, October 8th. So this is really, if there's one thing to take, right, is to make sure you understand the process, you know who can be an exam monitor, and you complete this process by October 8th. Any delay in doing this, right, increases the likelihood of needless worrying about stuff not happening on time, right? So please be sure to take that action item, that step. Stanford Honor Code. What is it? The Stanford Honor Code is a set of standards that establish the expectation for academic integrity required of all students, and you are now students in the university, right? If you want to get, I highly recommend Google search Stanford Honor Code. You will get to the university website where all the policies are detailed. But in a nutshell, you're supposed to do your own work. You're not supposed to help others with their work, and others are, and vice versa, right? So here are some violations that I think are interesting, right? And I collected these from prior classes. The teaching team in your class will also have additions to this policy. So looking at previous year's homework solutions, right? Either official or written by another student. Discussing homework problem, right? So individual assignments are to be completed individually. Submitting malicious code, right? Not an honorable thing to do. It's a violation of the honor code. Don't do it. Uploading your code, if you're dealing with computer code, to a public repository like GitHub, that's a violation. And we have the systems in place, right? So let's not try and see if we have systems in place to identify these events. I will say that the process is a serious process, a process of honor code violation. It is a very fair process, and in the few instances where we have been involved, we certainly noticed that there is a sincere effort on the part of the university to make sure that your side is heard. Know the policy. Course evaluations. There are two opportunities for you to give feedback. The first one will happen mid-quarter. We'll send to you via email the SCPD mid-quarter survey. Happens around week 5. That survey is for us to understand, to make sure that everything works, right? It is not a vehicle for you to ask questions of the teaching team, and it's not a vehicle for you to ask questions that are timely, right? We receive hundreds of responses, and while we read through all those responses, if there's something timely there that you need us to respond to, might take us a couple of weeks, that's not the way to go. The university end of quarter evaluation is available on the 10th and 11th week of the quarter. Very important to complete that. You do not want to cause incompletion of it, to cause any delay in you getting your grades at the end of the quarter. Important deadlines. First day of instruction is next week. The drop deadline is Friday, October 12th, before 5 p.m. Pacific time. Withdrawals and grading basis changes, November 16. Incomplete requests, December 7. Assignments and exam are subject to your class syllabus, right? So you're all working professionals, most of you are. However, work-related travel or heavy workload, generally speaking, is not considered a sufficient justification for skipping a deadline, right? So at the same time, we know that life happens. When events outside your control happen that might cause you to miss a deadline, be diligent and inform the teaching teams as early as you can, and do not hesitate to involve the student and client services team also. The earlier we know of a challenge, the earlier we have an opportunity to help. The last item here I want to speak to is tuition reimbursement, right? Many of you will receive tuition reimbursement from your companies. Some companies, because autumn quarter ends very near to the end of December, end of the year, some companies stop processing these requests, say on December 15th, right? Your responsibility is to understand the policy at your company, know if you have any deadlines for submitting tuition reimbursement requests in your company, and make sure that you know when will the grades be available. In certain cases, we can help you get your grades a few days earlier, but please let us know about that in advance. These are the important policies, right? All of it is on the website. Thank you for listening as we review this. I hope you've been busily entering and upvoting questions to paulf.com/scpd, so please take a moment, think about what we covered, and I will now introduce my colleague, Pax Hemeyer, who will also bring our panel of experts and will take us through what we hope is the heart of the conversation tonight, which is asking questions, right? Students, professor, TA. Pax?
Great. I'm Pax Hemeyer. I'm the Associate Director at SCPD, and so it's my pleasure to introduce the panel tonight, which is made up of instructors and students here as part of the SCPD program. So I'll just invite them to come up to the chairs up here, front and center, well, front and to the side, I suppose. And I'll introduce them as we go through, and then we'll come up with some questions, and then at the end, I'll come back to the questions that you'll be posting and pull everywhere and direct some of them to the panel here. So first is Nick Tricoli. He's a lecturer here in the computer science department at Stanford. And before teaching here, he was a graduate student. He was also the lead TA for the past 2 years for CS 106A and CS 106B. And so this quarter, he is teaching CS 106X and in the fall and CS 107 in the spring. So as his role as sort of the lead TA, he oversaw a lot of logistics for SCPD students and making sure that your experience is really fantastic. So we're excited to have him here today to share some of his insights. We're also really fortunate to be joined by Zara Kuchak, who's one of our most experienced TAs. She's a fifth-year PhD student in the electrical engineering department, and she's been a TA for some of our most popular courses. So machine learning, deep learning, intro to linear algebra. And this quarter, she's part of the teaching team for CS 229 machine learning. Is that correct?
Yes.
Fantastic. So we're excited to have her here and share some of her insights. In addition to our two instructors, we also have two students. So Colby Lopez is currently part of our honors cooperative program. He's pursuing a part-time master's in the management science and engineering program. He has a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Mississippi State. And he's working at Chevron. He's been working there for the past 5 years. He works in technical support for some of the mechanical operations. And he's been for Chevron. He's worked in Houston. He's worked in Australia. And now he's working over in Richmond. So we're excited to have him here tonight. And next to Colby is Tushar Dut, who has a bachelor's in computer science from Waterloo. He also has a bachelor's in business administration from Wilfrid Laurier University. And he's been part of the Google family for a while. So he started in ads. I hear that's where everyone starts at Google. And then he moved on to, let me see here. You were part of X, the Moonshot Factory. And now you're part of Alphabet's cybersecurity startup locally in Mountain View. And like Colby, Tushar is part of our honors cooperatives program. And he's pursuing a master's in computer science with dual focus in artificial intelligence and systems. So we're really excited to have you here today. And I've got the microphone, so we'll just pass it back and forth. And I want to start with just a high-level question here for Nick and Zara. So both of you have a lot of experience here working with students, helping them through. So Nick, I'll start with you. Just at a high level, what does it take to be a successful student here at SCPD? What would be your high-level advice to the students here tonight?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I think I've gotten the opportunity to have a lot of experience teaching SCPD classes, which has been a lot of fun. And I think the biggest thing I would probably say is to engage with the teaching staff as much as you possibly can. I think we certainly see from my personal experience and from other experiences from other TAs and instructors, the more that students on campus and remote engage with their teaching team, the better they do in the class because they get more responsive help, they form relationships with their TAs, which is something that you can absolutely do on campus, but is certainly harder to do when you're a remote student. But as you communicate with them, you can get better feedback, you can have more of a back and forth conversation about ways you can improve. And so that would be kind of my number one piece of feedback is the teaching team is, for every team that I've been on, has been extremely eager and and interested to hear feedback from every SCPD student and want to engage with them as much as possible. So, I encourage you to take advantage of that.
Before you pass on, just one question that's already come up maybe as a follow-up is who should students be reaching out to first? Is it the TA, the CA, the professor? Who's best to make that first outreach to, and how soon should they do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think certainly there's a lot of benefit in reaching out in the first week or two for sure, just to get some contact on the teaching team to kind of get your orientation. A lot of classes for SCPD organize the TA team to have certain SCPD students assigned to certain graders, for instance. That's a great person to reach out to because they're the ones that are going to be giving you feedback on ways to improve. And then last but not least, some classes have specific SCPD TAs that they might make available to you as well for office hours or other questions. So it really depends on kind of the class organization and the class size. But for the most part, there are usually multiple people that have different responsibilities in relation to you, and it's definitely beneficial to reach out to all of them.
Thank you, Nick. Zara, if you could share some of your insight.
Hi, I'm Zara, and I'm very excited to be again SCPD TA this quarter. So as Nick said, I just want to add one more thing is that to be a successful SCPD student, I think it is important, in addition to try to connect to the TAs, try to connect to other SCPD students. For CS229 in particular, we have a site called Piazza. Make sure that you log into the Piazza very early in the quarter. This is like the most important question and answer source for on-campus students and remote students. So when you got a question, just make sure that this question is not already asked in Piazza. And if it is a new for everyone, post it on Piazza. And also another good feature on the Piazza is that it helps you to find good teammate for your class. So basically, from my experience, I was a student here in Stanford. If you want to get the best outcome of the Stanford courses, especially in the CS department, is that you find the teammates that have the same concern as you, working on the same assignment, same project as you, that can help you to have the better experience. So it's not like you sit alone at home and do your assignments only by yourself. So it's good to be in connection with other students and have their help. So try to be connected to the TAs and to the other students, specifically SCPD, other SCPD students.
That's fantastic advice, and I have a high-level question for both Tushar and Colby, but maybe if you want to build on that, have either of you had that opportunity to reach out and make connections with other students at SCPD, and if so, could you talk about that?
Yeah, I stay in conversation with quite a few SCPD students, especially those who are in the HCP program. So one of the things that you guys will probably experience is a lot of the SCP students like to use what's called Slack. It's a quick time messaging system, kind of like Facebook Messenger. So I was actually just chatting with another SCPD student before this through Slack, and we use that avenue, Piazza, like she was mentioning before, and Skype or video chat. So that's my experience with it.
Awesome.
There's a Slack that I think a lot of SCPD students are on, and then there's also just depending on what companies you work on, you might find that there are some people in your company already taking courses through SCPD. That might be how you were introduced to it, so you can reach out to them. And also, you can just use Piazza or so on to meet up with other SCPD students. So.
Fantastic. And Tushar, maybe hold on to the microphone and just, could you share, so Zara and Nick offered their sort of high-level feedback. What would be your insights if you think back to your first quarter here with SCPD? I mean, what course were you taking, and what do you wish you had known before you began in the program?
So my first quarter with SCPD, I took, I can't remember the exact course number, but it was client-side web programming, essentially. And it was really good. I actually think for your first course, you might want to consider taking, it was a lighter course, it was a 100-level course, and so you might want to consider taking something like that to kind of gauge the workload and so on. I think that was really helpful, not to start with a heavier course. And just if I were to go back, one of the things would be, in general, you have to think of all these courses and your SCPD kind of career as more of a marathon rather than a sprint. So, try to, if you take all the intense courses all at once, or try to take multiple courses as in your first quarter or anything like that, you might, get turned off from the entire program. So definitely pace yourself, take breaks in between quarters if you need it, and, just think about it as being a longer term investment rather than just a 1 quarter investment.
That's great. Colby, do you have anything that you would add to that?
No, I agree with them completely about the longer term investment. These courses are very intense, and the teaching team puts a lot of effort into making sure that it's a really unique experience for you, so you're not just going to be doing problems out of the back of the book. You'll be very engaged. So, I agree with them completely. It is a marathon. So.
Could you both maybe talk a little bit more about the kind of workload that you experienced and what your typical week is like as an SCPD student?
Yeah, so I'm taking one class, or I'm fixing to start up one class right now, but I take one class a quarter. So my workload, I dedicate probably about 3 days a week towards, just this class in the evenings or so. That means attending the teaching assistants live Q&A sessions that you can ask. It's typically through Skype or some other method, and engaging with other SCPD students. I've actually been on campus quite a few times. For my last class, I did a presentation here. For my first class here, I spent an entire month down here working for on a robotics competition. So my workload is typically pretty heavy with SCPD. I'd say 20 to 30 hours a week is average, sometimes heavier depending on what classes you're taking.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I would say it's very dependent on the class you take. I've had classes where it was 15 hours a week, and I've had classes where it was above 30 hours a week. The key thing, I think, which was pointed out earlier, is having a study group probably cuts your workload down significantly. I think my first few classes I just tried to go it alone and just do it all by myself, and that probably added 10 hours a week to my workload. But it's an investment of time, especially if you're working. And the other thing is, if you want to take classes, almost everybody I know is taking 1 class a quarter. So if you're considering taking more than 1 class a quarter, definitely really strongly consider that decision and make sure you know what you're getting into before you do that.
That's great advice.
I did 2 classes that sucked, so I was here until 3 a.m. for multiple times a week. So, yeah, I've advised against it.
Heard it here. You heard it here. Yeah. So maybe building on that, Zara, could you talk about some of the common difficulties and struggles that you see SCPD students facing on your side?
Oh, yeah, sure. I think one of the most common problems is that the SCPD students start working on an assignments too late. Start working on an assignment as soon as it is published and posted. Because if you just postpone doing the assignments on the weekend, that's not how it works, right? So on weekends, you see some problem, you post on Piazza, it takes some time for the teaching staff because they are on the weekends too, right? So you should expect some delays, and then the other CPD might complain that, hey, it's let's say, 5 hours that I posted my question, but I didn't get any answer yet. So try to start working on assignments as early as it is published. And then the other thing, as they mentioned, so I was TA for 229 and 230. Also, I took 221 and other CS courses. They are not easy courses. They are intense. Be prepared for them. So we had a ton of emails 3 weeks before final saying that, hey, I didn't expect this workload from these courses. May I request incomplete? May I drop the course? This is not something that usually happens. So if you think you cannot dedicate enough time to this course, just reconsider your decision for taking this course. We have, as far as I know, we have a long wait list for the students who want to take this course, and they can't be enrolled. So if you think you cannot dedicate enough time for these intense courses, reconsider your decision. Thank you.
Oh, Tushar, did you want to add that?
Sorry, just so it's not all, necessarily doom and gloom. I think there's definitely like a rhythm, and it might take you till like your second or third quarter to hit that rhythm. But your first quarter, you're going to be trying to figure out how to balance, like, what time do I watch the lectures on? Do I watch it after dinner? Do I watch it on the weekends? And you're going to be trying to figure out, like, should I start the assignments early or should I wait till, later? How long does it take? By the time I maybe hit my third course and my fourth course, I was starting to get into this rhythm. And when you get into that rhythm, like, it makes it a lot easier because you know that, okay, the lecture is published Tuesday. I'm going to set aside some time to like watch it Tuesday night. I'm going to like do the assignment. I have friends here that I'm going to contact. I'm going to like post my question on Piazza early. Like, it is very, very hard, not to understate it at all. But don't be completely scared off from it. You'll get the hang of it eventually.
Nick, do you want to add anything, common struggles that you see?
Yeah, sure. So I think, one of the things that we try to encourage a lot to help people do really well in the classes is to take advantage of all of the resources that we publish. And what I mean by that is a lot of the extra session videos that we record, a lot of the additional handouts and section problems that we post. As one of the remote students that John Mitchell mentioned, even though I was an on-campus student, I know a lot of the struggles around keeping yourself motivated to keep up with the material, especially if you're not attending lecture on a regular basis. Cough, cough. As I did, regrettably, whatever. I graduated, so it's all fine. But the point being, like in one of our classes, CS 106A or 106B, we have discussion sections every week that are required for on-campus students, but are obviously optional for remote students. We make videos available for those, and a lot of times from feedback from on-campus students, we know that these discussion sections are one of the single most helpful resources that we have for students because, especially in computer science, practice is what makes you better at the subject. So even if videos like that are published and you're not required to attend a section or watch a section live streamed or anything like that, we highly recommend that you pretend that you're in a discussion section at a specific time, or watch the video as soon as it's published, or take advantage of all those resources, even if there's not a structured, reinforced requirement for you to use them. We try to post them for a reason. We post them when we see needs that students raise for, oh, I didn't understand this well enough. Okay, well, let's try to post an additional video clarifying that topic. A lot of times we see people, right before exams or assignments are due, they'll try to binge all the videos. And, I know firsthand it can work maybe sometimes, but, a lot of the times, we try to structure the course and the schedule and post resources in a way that if you can keep up with the schedule as much as possible, you have a great chance of being successful.
Nick, can you mentioned some of the discussion sections. How does office hours, I know it probably depends on the course, but how does office hours work for remote students?
Sure. So a lot of times, at least in the experience that I've had, we try to hold remote office hours over Google Hangouts or QStatus, if any of you have experience with QStatus, where you can sign up online, we'll video call you, and we'll help you one-on-one on your computer remotely. Just tying back to one of the things I said earlier, a lot of the time when we're trying to schedule office hours for students, we are eager to hear from you about how we can improve office hours times, structure, the way that we organize, how we help students. Whether it's, oh, this time isn't great for me, this time would be better, or I had an experience where, something, a TA did this and I wish they had done that. We love that kind of feedback to improve our office hours because you're the ones that are taking advantage of them. We don't have on-campus students that are taking advantage of those remote office hours. Those are just for you. But it really does depend on the class. Some classes will combine remote and local office hours at the same time. Others will have discrete office hours for SCPD students alone. So it really depends on the course structure, but they will are always eager to hear feedback for how they can make that better.
Thank you. Zara, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, yeah, sure. Specifically for machine learning course, CS 229, we're going to have like a post on Piazza and asking when is the most convenient time for you SCPD students to attend the office hours. Is it like after 5 p.m. or is it early morning? Depends on what time zone you are. And then we're going to pick up the most convenient time that satisfies, it cannot satisfy the needs of all of the SCPD students, but at least we can try to satisfy most of them. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And actually, sticking with you, Zara, so we've gotten a few questions. You've been a TA for some of the really big courses. Can you maybe help give the students some of the insight into how that teaching team works? Because it's a big teaching team, and so just they can have some kind of sympathy to the way the structure of your team and how it works.
Thank you. Last year, we have over 1,200 students for CS 229. I guess like 600 students for CS230. One thing that I want to mention that remember the TAs or teaching staffs, they are grad students. So they're not full-time employees sitting back and behind their laptops answering your question on Piazza or on emails. They need to take some courses. They also have some TAs answering their questions. So maybe it will be nice if you give some time for them to get back to your questions, some decent time, some reasonable time. And one specific advice for the ones that taking 229, 221, or 230 is that like 4 weeks after the quarter starts, we're gonna tell you who is your project TA is. Make sure that you know who's your project TA is, because the project TA is the one that is gonna evaluate your project at the end of the quarter. So you will be in contact with your project TA. And also make sure that, look at the course website, make sure that we have a specific time slot for the SCPDs. So make sure that you know where this time slot is. We mostly use Zoom for communicating with the SCPD students. Make sure that you know how Zoom works, what's the ID for the TAs, and then make sure that you're online at the same time that they are online. So basically, the course website and the Piazza are two main sources that you should refer. One more advice that I can give you is that always be on top of your grades. So basically, we try to upload your grades for each assignment, right? After you submit your assignment, we're gonna have like a week to grade it, and then we publish your grade. Make sure that you see your grade, and if you have any complaint, make sure that we're gonna give you like a week for submitting your complaint. Make sure that you submit your complaint in that specific window. Do not postpone all of your complaint by end of the quarter, right? It's not how it works. We have like a ton of requests at the end of the quarter, and it is on the best of your benefit to know what your grade is for each assignment. And if you have any complaint, just submit it right away.
Okay. Thank you, Zara.
Sure.
Colby, Tushar, maybe sort of building on what you were talking about earlier, I really like this idea of creating a rhythm. What were some of the ways that you've gotten help from your boss or from family members or from friends? How have you reached out to them to help support you to accomplish essentially a part-time job on top of your full-time?
Well, my supervisor was my exam proctor most of the time, so he was fully aware of what my course load was. And there was a time where we were working 7 days a week. So, of course, I had to take some time out of work to actually complete this coursework. So just keeping them engaged. And I'm married as well, so when I was traveling quite a bit, my wife was always like, "You're just traveling all the time now, you're doing schoolwork. We don't really get a lot of time together." So, it's just about having that open communication and, kind of planning your actual schedule. So some of the things I did to plan the schedule were, talk to the teaching assistants, how long should this homework be taking? If I'm extending them beyond this time, go looking for help or something, and, just plan your day around that, I guess.
Okay.
It's going great.
Yeah, to build on that, communication is obviously very, very important. Like, make sure your boss knows you're doing a course, and that it's going to take some time. I think like one of the things is at the start of every quarter you're going to get a syllabus, and it'll have here are all the important dates. Here are the exam dates. Here are the assignment dates. I throw all the exam dates and stuff into my calendar just so there's no surprises later on. Your manager hopefully can see your calendar, and they know that you're possibly booked for that time. There's also I think one important piece of advice I got when I started was, despite your best efforts, despite your boss's best efforts, and the core staff's best efforts, there might be times where it's going to be like, I have this work deadline and I have this school deadline, and they conflict, and there's just not much anybody can do, and like you planned in advance and everything, and that's going to happen. And one of the things about finding your rhythm is just realizing that happens. It's part of the whole SCPD thing instead of being a full-time student. And so if that happens, don't beat yourself up over it. Prioritize like you would prioritize anything else. maybe you don't finish every single question on the assignment, right? You just finish the first 5 or the 5 that you knew or something. And yeah, just talk to the course staff and use your late days. So.
We've gotten a couple questions about exam monitors. I know you can't answer all those, but can you maybe just talk briefly about your experience with taking exams as an SCPD student?
Yeah, so I had the designated exam monitor, so I just chose my manager, but I've always taken my exams on campus. So I just come and take the exam. I've taken an exam in this room many times, in some other rooms, and you just take it with the students that are taking it here, if you live in the area. Yeah, I guess maybe you can speak to the monitor.
Yeah, so I use my supervisor. I was in Australia whenever I first started here in 2016, and yeah, so I think there's a list on the SCPD website that tells you who you can nominate as an exam monitor. One of those are your direct supervisors. The other ones are like testing centers, and I think a library is in there or something like that. But yeah, I mean, so I use my supervisor. It worked out really well. It's just engaging with him, letting him know when all the exam dates were, and always blocking out time on his and your calendar to, have a plan to actually take the exam that day. But yeah, I never had any issues with it, I guess.
Okay. Zara and Nick, sort of keeping the questions on exams, how would you recommend that students prepare for those kind of big deadlines in the quarter, the midterms, the finals, or big final projects?
Oh, sure. So start early again. So make sure that you know when exactly is the midterm, specifically for 229, 221, and 230. And then try to start preparing for the exams like 2 weeks ahead of the exam. The exams are not, again, easy. And then you're competing with the most brilliant students in the world in Stanford. They are taking the same course as you're taking. And then we are looking at the distribution of the grades at the end, right? So make sure that you start preparing for the exams early in the quarter. And we post midterm questions like a week before the exam. Make sure that you went through the practice midterms, and make sure that you know what you're expected in the exam time. Also, we post the logistics of the exams like 2 weeks before the exams. Make sure that on the Piazza, make sure that you read all of them, and there's no surprises on the exam time.
Okay. Nick, did you add anything?
Sure, yeah. So I think there are a couple things that I've seen over time. The first one is, a lot of classes have review sessions outside of their normal class time. And so for that reason, it's not something that everyone can attend, whether you're on campus or whether you're remote, you can watch an additional video. But one way or another, I'd highly recommend taking the time that the course provides you to kind of reflect and rehash all the material that you've already learned, and take that chance to reach out to the course staff if you have any confusion or misunderstandings about any of the course material. We do our best to try to mark a period of time in between assignments and the midterm where we are eager to answer as many questions as we can and say, hey, try these practice problems. Tell us if you have any questions or are confused. And along those similar lines, try to form a study group either online or in person. I know, from personal experience, study groups are like the bomb because everyone's like, oh, you know that half, I know this half, I love you, and then you can study together, and then it'll all work out, except I'm not condoning cheating. No, I'm not. But the point is that, if you get together with somebody who's really solid on one subject and you're really solid on another, and you can help each other out, whether it's meeting in person and doing problems together, or even something I've done in the past, which is teaming up together and making an online study guide together and saying, hey, why don't you try to fill in this part, I'll fill in this part, and then we can go over and discuss the material together. So having somebody to bounce ideas and challenges and questions off of, whether it's the teaching staff or another fellow student, I think is really helpful come exam time.
Fantastic. We're nearing the end, and so I actually, just some of the tips that you've provided, I was thinking maybe as a kind of a final takeaway, what would be, especially in these first 2 weeks, what would be the 1 or 2 things that you would recommend all students do in those first 2 weeks?
I think the number one thing I recommend is talk to your professor and your teaching staff just as a person, not in an academic setting. Just introduce yourself, your background, what you're interested in, why you're here, why you're doing this. I think a lot of things make you as a crowd unique, but one of the most interesting things is a lot of you are doing this in a professional setting. You're doing this to achieve professional goals or do more in your workplace or work on projects that you couldn't previously do before. We love to hear about that. It's different when you're a student. Obviously, you're a student working towards a full-time degree, and you obviously have a lot of interest as well, but you as a crowd, are you in a unique position where in a lot of cases you're applying what you learned directly in a job that you're doing at the same time. And there's nothing that makes us more excited than hearing about, oh, I learned about this in your lecture last week, and then this week, we were working on a project, and, I got to apply what I learned. Or, if you have an open-ended project in a class, and you decide to, incorporate some aspect of your work in that project and have kind of hit two birds with one stone, that is fantastic, and we love to hear about that. So it really makes us excited. It lets us connect with you, so I'd highly recommend you do that.
Awesome. Do you have any other examples of sort of the key contributions, the way an SCPD student has really added to or increased the class experience for themselves and other students?
Yeah, obviously you all have a really unique background where in a lot of cases you have more experience either from past degree standpoint or an industry standpoint where we've had Piazza discussion groups, as others have mentioned, where we've seen SCPD students chime in with like, oh, well, in this background that I had from a previous degree I did, or this job that I'm doing, or something like that, they'll chime in with this amazingly relevant answer to a question or application of some concept that we're learning. So, your background and your experience is one of the biggest assets that you have, and, nothing makes us more gratified than to see that kind of shine in a class setting.
Fantastic. Zara, what would be the one thing that you would recommend everyone do in these first 2 weeks?
Probably for many courses, for many CS courses, you need to pick the topic of your project in the early weeks, like first 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Make sure that you pick an appropriate topic for your project. Don't be too ambitious. Make like a decent goal, and make sure that your teaching staff very well. Make sure that you know the resources. Make sure that how you can see your grades, how you can ask the question, how you can submit your homeworks, and just be on top of everything in the first 2 weeks of the quarter. If you have any questions, just send us an email or post on the Piazza, and we will be more than happy to answer you.
Thank you. Colby?
I guess my advice would just be to read the syllabus. So a lot of courses use their own platform, whether it's Python, MATLAB, R, or something like that. I've seen a lot of SCPD students wait till 3 days before the homework to try to install all this software and order their textbooks, and it's not working, or the textbook's not coming until a day after the homework. Just read the syllabus. You're a distant student, so you might have to take a little bit more initiative to get some of these softwares and books before the other students do.
Yeah, two things I would say is one, the study group. This is actually a great opportunity. You're with a bunch of people that are probably taking some of the same courses that you are, that are also SCPD students. Maybe try to find one or two people that you can go study with when the semester, the quarter starts. And then the second thing would be, like when the first lecture comes out early next week, try to watch it as soon as you can. It's very easy to fall behind and very, very hard to catch back up if you're 2 lectures behind or something. So. Yeah, just watch it as soon as you can.
That's fantastic, and that's perfect segue, Tushar. Thank you very much. So I want to thank our panel, first of all. So if we can give them a round of applause. As Tushar said, this is an amazing opportunity. We're going to have a reception right now, so this is a chance. Both if you have more questions, to reach out to SCPD staff. There are student client services here. They can answer some of your questions. John Notman's in the back in the white shirt. You can ask him your questions. I hopefully didn't send too many people to him right away. As well as some of the course advisors for, I believe, CS and EE will be there. Some of our panelists will be there. And as Tushar said, I think most of you have written your course and where you're working on your name tags. This is a great way to go out there and see and meet some fellow students, to build those connections, and to check that first thing off your checklist, which is forming a study group. So follow us. You can follow us up the hill to 408 Panama. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.